Hello, everybody, and welcome into this week's edition of the OKPreps Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Michael Knight, the director of OKPreps.com, and it is week 3, the final week of non-district play. I know that there will be some non-district games later on in the season for some of the small schools, but for the majority of schools, this is the final quote-unquote tune-up game before the real games start in week 4, the final week in September. Those games start counting towards playoff seeding later this year. So the final week of non-district play, we're going to get you ready for all of it right here on the OKPreps Kickoff Show. If you're just now joining us for the first time this week, we definitely encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel or to our podcast network for all of our kickoff shows throughout the 2019 season. All you have to do is go to YouTube, to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/OKPreps, hit subscribe, and then not only will you get every kickoff show every single Thursday, you'll also get all of our highlights each and every single week from the games that we go cover on a week in and week out basis. This week, we'll be in Norman on Thursday as Moore takes on the Norman Tigers. And on Friday night, we'll be in Claremore. You see the matchup right there, Claremore and Edison. It's our top game of the week, and we'll be in Claremore on Friday night to check out that matchup. All of those highlights will be available on OKPreps.com. And if you're a podcast fan, if you're listening to us right now, you can do that. You do have that option to be able to listen to this program. Go to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast network. Just search OKPreps Podcast. Hit subscribe, and then not only will you get all of our kickoff shows, but you'll also get the OKPreps Roundup, which is our recap show. We don't do a recap show on video. It is only on podcast, so go check that out right now if you haven't done so already. If you're wanting to recap week 2, you can check that out right now. Just search OKPreps Podcast on iTunes, hit subscribe, and then you'll get all of our great podcast content throughout the 2019 season. But as we do each and every single week, we kick things off on the kickoff show with our top 10 games. Every Monday, we put out the OKPreps top 10 games of the week. It is the final week of non-district play, and there aren't as many marquee matchups as you would expect in week 3, the final week of non-district action. Week 1 and week 2 definitely spoiled us with top 5 matchups across the board. This week, you don't have as many ranked teams going against one another, but we did find plenty of them for our OKPreps top 10 games. You can check out that article right now on OKPreps.com, and be sure to check back every single Monday for the OKPreps top 10 games. But let's break it down right now. Let's throw the graphic up on the screen. Here's this week's top 10 games in the state of Oklahoma. And you see right there, we saw the 2 helmets at the beginning of the show, right up front, center stage. It's a 5A matchup as Claremore takes on Edison, and we're going to break down each one of these top 10 games with you. We'll also show highlights from the matchup. If it does end up happening, we have all of these 10 matchups. All 10 of these teams played one another last year, or excuse me, all 10 of these matchups happened last year, and we have highlights to show you from those matchups a year ago. But let's dive in with our number 1 matchup. You see the helmets once again. It's number 4 Edison going on the road to take on number 5 Claremore in a top 5 showdown in Class 5A. The Edison Eagles come in at 1-1 on the season. Claremore does as well. The Zebras at 1-1. Claremore with a win over Bartlesville. Edison with a blowout victory over Memorial. The one loss for both teams is a similar one. Both of them lost to Sapulpa. Edison lost to the Chieftains in week 1 by, I believe, 8 points. Claremore let one slip away as Sapulpa ran away from the Zebras last week. 49-24, I believe, was the final in that one. So they have familiar foes on the schedule. Claremore very successful against Edison last year. They went 2-0 against the Eagles in 2018. They won in the regular season 23-21. And then they met again in the first round of the playoffs. And if you remember, at that point of the year, a lot of people were talking about Edison considering what star running back Savion Morrison had accomplished in the final 5 weeks of the regular season, running for nearly 2,000 yards in the final 5 games alone, and getting Edison not only back into the playoffs, but having a home playoff game for the first time in a long time at Edison. And they were definitely hungry to get another shot at Claremore, and things just did not go well for the Eagles as they lost to the Zebras 34-7, as Claremore would go on to face Carl Albert once again in the 5A quarterfinals, and we know how that story ended with the Titans beating the Zebras on their way to a third consecutive state championship. Now, this matchup this year is completely different, as you have both teams coming back with a lot of experience, both teams coming back with a lot of expectations, as both Edison and Claremore want to be one of the best teams in Class 5A, not only just one of the best teams on the east side, but one of the best teams in 5A, period. And I think that both of them have earned that right, as they have so much talent. They have star power on both sides of the ball. They have the ability to be one of the best in 5A. Are they Carl Albert good? Are they state championship good? Well, we have the rest of the season to figure that out. But as for this week, this is a heavy hitter matchup. There's going to be stars all over the field, and I'm looking forward to getting out to Claremore. I just hope the weather cooperates with us, as the weather forecast does not look kind for Friday evening across the state of Oklahoma and on into the weekend. But we're mainly concerned about Friday night. It does not look that great as far as the weather forecast right now, but we are taping on Wednesday, so things can definitely change between now and when things kick off up in Claremore on Friday night. But we're looking forward to getting out to our OKPreps game of the week. Our number 2 matchup is another top 10 matchup. We go up to 6A1, featuring 2 undefeated teams, as number 7 Westmore will play host to number 8 Mustang. Both teams coming into this matchup at 2-0 on the season. Mustang beating Westmore head-to-head 21-14. That was one of the bright spots in Mustang's season a year ago, as they were able to knock off the Jags. And now coming into this year, it's interesting because Westmore, they came into this season looking to not only prove that they were the best in Moore, but to prove that they were one of the best teams on the west side. They definitely got everybody's attention in week 1 when they knocked off Moore. And then when you look at the other side of it, Mustang, with first-year head coach Lee Blankenship, who's going to join us later on here in the OKPreps Kickoff show, he has completely rejuvenated this program. Not only did they win their season opener in a big rivalry game against UConn, then next week, the following week, week 2, they definitely grabbed everybody's attention when they beat Edmond Santa Fe 24-21. Now, look, Edmond Santa Fe has a great defense. They have some question marks offensively, but they have stars on that defensive side of the ball. I mean, guys who are going to be ending up playing not only Division I football, but Division I football at a high level, Power 5 Conference Division I football. And so for Mustang to go face Edmond Santa Fe, win that one 24-21, it definitely grabbed everyone's attention. And now they focus on another team that's ranked higher than them, as they're trying to continue to climb the rankings and get back to where they were earlier in this decade, which was one of the best on the west side of Oklahoma, making it to semifinals, making it to the playoffs year in and year out. And I think Coach Blankenship has done a great job. Obviously, it's still very early on in the season, but 2 very impressive wins. Westmore certainly has their work cut out for them. Our number 3 game, we go down to Class 2A, another top 10 battle in the same class. We love those matchups, as number 6 Sperry, the defending state champs, come in undefeated at 2-0. They will host Kingston, number 7 in Class 2A, and they come in undefeated as well on the early 2019 season. And if you go back to last season, Sperry, they would go on to win a state championship, and their one loss was to Beggs. If you remember that Week 10 matchup, one of the most emotional games, arguably the most emotional game after the tragedy that happened in Beggs earlier in that week. Beggs would rally to beat Sperry in the regular season finale. Sperry would get revenge on Beggs in the state championship game by winning it and taking home the gold ball. But when you look at that season that Sperry had, another close call for the Pirates was this matchup all the way back in Week 3, as Kingston nearly knocked off the Pirates early on last season. And when you look at what Kingston was able to do, they lost only twice last year. That Week 3 loss to Sperry, and then they lost to Beggs in the playoffs. Both teams, of course, would go on to play each other in the state championship game. Kingston's a very good football team. This is a team that, certainly with Class 2A the way it is, and when you look at our rankings in 2A, you look at the teams that are ranked from 6 to 10, like Asperry and Kingston. We mentioned Beggs. They're ranked number 9 in our 2A rankings. Jones is number 8 in our 2A rankings. And these teams, the majority of years, they're top 5 teams. They're state championship contenders. But with the teams dropping down from 3A to 2A, that happened last year. But still, that trickle-down effect, it still has an impact this season, as 2A, once again, is a loaded class from top to bottom. And when you look at every single team in the top 10, I can make an argument that not only are they playoff contenders, they're quarterfinal, semifinal, and for a lot of cases, state championship contenders all throughout that top 10 ranking. And so as Kingston goes to Sperry, it's a huge matchup. It's definitely one that you'll want to watch. Sperry obviously has had a lot of success over the last several years. Let's see. They haven't been tested so far. They're going to get a test on Friday night. A game taking place on Thursday night. It's our number 4 matchup, as Clinton will travel south to take on Lawton MacArthur. As Clinton coming in at 1-1, they will travel to Lawton as the Highlanders come in at 1-1 as well. Clinton ranked number 4 in Class 4A. Lawton Mac ranked number 10. Both teams not dropping after suffering losses last week. Clinton loses to Heritage Hall. Lawton MacArthur loses to Lawton. Both teams stay pat at their respected places in the rankings for each class. As look, a lot of teams lose to Heritage Hall and a lot of teams lose to Lawton, and that's what happens. And so just because you lose a game doesn't automatically mean that you drop in the rankings. But Clinton, big bounce back week for them. Offensively, they have speed, they have talent. They love to run the ball. They want to go up and down the field, really kind of shorten the game and control the clock and control the possessions. And defensively, if they can force some turnovers, it could end up being a long night for Lawton MacArthur. For the Highlanders, they love to sling the ball around. Their quarterback is one of the more underrated guys in the state. I've seen a little bit of film on him. He really impressed me in week 1. I think he threw for nearly or just over 300 yards in their week 1 win over Lawton Eisenhower. Obviously, things didn't go the way they would like last week in the rivalry game against the Wolverines. But at the same time, this is a good opportunity to bounce back for both teams on a Thursday night. It is a short week, of course, but at the same time, a big opportunity awaits both of these squads as they take the field on Thursday. We stay on Thursday for our next matchup, but we go back up to 6A1 as number 5 Norman will play host to number 9 Moore, and I will be at that game shooting all the highlights from both teams, as both teams feature Division I quarterbacks. For Moore, it's Daniel Deuce Highshaw, the Kansas commit, and for Norman, it's Cade Horton, who's an OU commit, committed to play for the Sooners, both baseball and football. And Horton, obviously a standout on the baseball field. How much football he ends up playing, we'll wait and see on that, but definitely a star on the baseball field, and he's had a huge impact on this Tiger football team over the last couple of years. As Norman and Moore go into battle on Thursday night, Moore won this matchup 14-7 last season, and if you look at this series over the course of the matchup between Moore and Norman, it's streaky. So if you have a team that's won, they usually riddle off 5, 6, 7 straight wins in the series. We'll see if the same thing holds true on Thursday night. Again, you can check those highlights following the game between Moore and the Norman Tigers. Norman definitely appears to have one of their better teams in recent memory. The same can be said about Moore, so something has to give when these two teams square off on Thursday night. We go down to Class 2A for our number 6 game, as number 10 Holland Hall, coming in at 2-0, will travel short bus ride over to Metro Christian. The top-ranked Patriots coming in at 2-0 as well. Metro Christian went to Holland Hall last year and dominated the Dutch. I was there for that game, and the Patriots made quick work of Holland Hall. I believe Ryan Johnson scored on one of the first few plays of the game for Metro. He's, of course, graduated, but they still have Asher Link, their star quarterback, who had a big game against Holland Hall last year. So, look, Holland Hall, another great example of a team that's ranked in Class 2A in that 5 to 10 range. Most years, they would be further on up, and despite what happens, or no matter what happens on Friday night, they probably won't drop out of the top 10 rankings. I think number 10 is about right for Holland Hall. In fact, you can make the argument that they could be a couple of spots higher in the 2A rankings. But when you're going on the road, when you're facing a top-ranked team in Metro Christian, it's going to be a tough task. Look, Asher Link in this offense has it rolling for Metro Christian. But the thing that impressed me the most a few weeks ago against Broken Bow, and I mentioned it on the Kickoff show a couple of weeks back, was their defense. Not only, I mean, when you go see Metro Christian, you expect for them to put up points. You expect for them to provide some fireworks on the offensive side of the ball. What you might not expect is how dominant and how athletic and how quick that defense is for the Patriots. So Holland Hall definitely has their work cut out for them. If they can try to contain Asher Link and this Metro Christian offense, and I'm not saying stop, because I don't think you can stop them, but you can contain them. You can limit their opportunities. If you get a turnover here, a turnover there, make sure you take advantage of it. And if you're able to do that, it could make for an interesting ball game. Otherwise, Metro Christian could end up with another blowout. Another big game in Class 2A has number 9 Beggs in action as they welcome in Shiloh Christian out of Arkansas. Shiloh Christian, one of the top private programs over in the state of Arkansas. You might remember them from their dominant runs later in the previous decade, early on in this decade. Shiloh Christian, one of those top teams in the state of Arkansas, and they're once again one of the top in their respective classes. They come over to Oklahoma to take on Beggs. Beggs went over to Springdale last year to take on Shiloh. They would lose it 28-21. A valiant comeback, though, for the Golden Demons as they trailed 21-0 early on in the ball game. It was about 6 minutes left in the second quarter when Shiloh scored their third touchdown. The next thing you know, Beggs is down 21-0. The Golden Demons would rally, but that rally would fall short as they fell to Shiloh Christian. What is this Beggs team made of? They haven't, I mean, they blew out Okmulgee. They blew out last week's opponent. I want to see what they're made of, and this is a huge opportunity for them to take some momentum into district play, a district that does feature the defending champion Sperry Pirates. So it's a big opportunity for Beggs. This is an opportunity to not only get a much-needed win, a little bit of revenge as well, but carry some momentum into the important games that matter, those being district games starting next week. Our number 8 game features the number 2 ranked team out of Class 4A, Bethany, hosting number 9 Kingfisher out of Class 3A. Kingfisher has stumbled already once this season. That was to 4A's number 1 Tuttle. Bethany 2-0 on the year. Bethany won an instant classic against Kingfisher a year ago, 38-35. Bethany beat the Yellow Jackets on a last-second field goal to knock off the Jackets 38-35. And look, I've said it about Kingfisher already, and their head coach Jeff Myers is going to join us here later on in the program in a few minutes to talk about this matchup. I've said it already about Kingfisher. Kingfisher is not what they were a year ago. How could you be when you have to replace some of the stars that they had last season, especially on the offensive side of the ball? However, I like the way they bounced back. They got beat by Tuttle. They gave up a lot of yards to Tuttle last week, or 2 weeks ago, but they bounced back last week against Hennessy. I think they won 68-0. I know they pitched a shutout, and I'm pretty sure they scored almost 70 in that matchup. So Kingfisher bouncing back in a big way last week. Their quarterback had a huge game throwing the ball and running the ball. He needs to carry that momentum over into a huge matchup as they go on the road to take on a Bethany team led by a fantastic quarterback in his own right, Sammy Brent, who was a finalist for last year's OKPreps Player of the Year award. That kid can do it all. He can throw the ball, he can run the ball, and on the defensive side of the ball, he's a threat at the safety position to turn you over. He finished, I think, with nearly 80 tackles last year. He had 6, 7, or 8 interceptions on the defensive side of the ball alone. So this kid has the talent to be a star in Class 4A football. We saw it firsthand last year. For Kingfisher, how do you keep this thing rolling? How do you keep your young quarterback going after last week's blowout victory over Hennessy. And for Bethany, they're in a brutal district. They're in a brutal district that features Blanchard, that features defending champion Tuttle. They have that 1 versus 2 clash looming in a few weeks. I believe that's the first or second Friday in October. So if you're Bethany, you want all the momentum you can get heading into district play. And what better way to carry some momentum than knocking off a very good Kingfisher team? Our number 9 matchup, you have Millwood traveling to Tulsa to take on Cassia Hall. Millwood coming in at 1-1. Cassia the same at 1-1. Cassia ranked number 10 in Class 3A. Millwood ranked number 4 in Class 2A. Millwood dominated this matchup, really has dominated this matchup the last 2 years, but they beat Cassia 38-7 in their matchup last season. But this is a completely new Millwood team. They don't have Marcus Major. They don't have Demarion Houston. They don't have Daniel Howard. And even some of the guys that they expected to have an impact this year, they don't have, as Millwood suffered a lot of injuries in their week 1 loss to Heritage Hall. And some of those key players that they expected to have an impact, they're missing some time. And so the biggest key, and if you checked out our article on OKPreps about the top 10 games, we mentioned how the biggest key to victory for either team is going to be based on the health of some of these star players for Millwood. If they aren't 100%, that opens the door for Cassia Hall to get a big-time win over a Millwood team that no matter what happens, even if they go into district play at 1-2, which will be a lot different than the last couple of years when they had that long winning streak going, Millwood is still one of the best teams in Class 2A, and I have faith that they're going to figure it out by the end of the season, get those pieces in the right spots, and they'll be a contender once again. Cassia Hall, they're trying to climb that ladder and become a contender. They had last week off after losing the Hall Brawl to Holland Hall. Say that 3 times fast. They had last week off. Let's see how they bounce back when they get back onto the field Friday night against Millwood. And our final game, we go to Class 4A. Speaking of bounce back, both of these teams looking to bounce back, as Fort Gibson will travel to number 5 Wagner. Wagner 1-1 on the season. Fort Gibson looking for their first win. This is a team in Fort Gibson that, yeah, look, based on this matchup, you probably favor Wagner, and you look at Fort Gibson, they're probably going to go into district play at 0-3. This is a very dangerous Fort Gibson team that if you write them off just because they lost their first 3 games, you're making a mistake in Class 4A. And look, if you're a coach in Class 4A, you already know this. You don't need me saying it. This Fort Gibson team is talented. They're resilient, and that non-district schedule was brutal. They lost a close overtime game to Berry Hill that could have gone the other way last week. They lost a close one to Tahlequah in the season opener, I believe. So this is a Fort Gibson team that is hungry for a win. Wagner, kind of the same thing. They got stunned by Pryor last week, and they're going to be hungry and angry, ready to get back onto the field on Friday night. So both teams looking for some momentum going into district play, regardless of what happens. If Fort Gibson gets a win, if Wagner gets a win, you can't write off the loser, as Wagner at 1-2. That's a dangerous Bulldog squad. Fort Gibson, no matter what, if they go into district play winless, I would still like the Tigers to come out of that district and get one of those 4 playoff spots. All right, enough talk from me, enough breakdowns from me. Let's hear from some of the coaches in these matchups, and we start with our game of the week. You got Claremore, you got Edison. Number 4 Eagles going to the number 5 Zebras in a matchup that definitely, at least we saw last year, has some playoff implications, as both teams ended up having a rematch a year ago. Will we see another rematch down the line? Let's not worry about that. Let's just focus on Friday night. And we caught up with Edison head coach Tony Daniels to talk about how fired up his squad is to get another shot at the Zebras, who beat them not once, but twice last year.
Our kids are pumped. Anything that you do in life and anything that you get another opportunity to play a team, especially ones that had kind of tripped you up or had beaten you, the previous 2 times that we played them last year, the kids have kind of taken it upon themselves. I mean, we have a lot of returning kids that are going back out and playing. It means something to the kids. They don't want to lose like they lost the last 2 matchups by 2 points in the first one, and then the second game in the playoff game, having the chance to tie it up and fumbling on the 1-yard line. So I mean, the kids are taking it personal, and they're kind of hungry at this shot of having another opportunity to try to redeem themselves.
First-year head coach Lee Blankenship has the Mustang Broncos rolling right now. They beat UConn. They beat Edmond Santa Fe. Now they focus their attention on a team that once again is ranked above them in the 6A1 rankings in Westmore. And Coach Blankenship joins us to talk about this week's matchup and his program.
Man, just trying to do the little things right every day. I mean, I know that's a super coach answer, but we're just trying to win today. We're trying to win in practice on Wednesday afternoon and again on Thursday and be the best version of us that we can be. And hopefully the results on Friday night take care of themselves. I'm so proud of our kids. I thought we had a chance to be pretty good, or to at least win some ball games just after being able to get here in January and get to know our kids and see the talent that we have, watch their work ethic, and more than anything, just trying to create that mentality inside of them that says it's okay to make a mistake, it's okay to mess up, focus on your attitude and effort, play the next play, and just stay in the ball game, keep fighting. And our kids definitely have done that the last couple of weeks, so I've been really proud of them.
The top-ranked Metro Christian Patriots in Class 2A kicked the season off with a bang by blowing out Broken Bow. They took the following week off, and then week 2 they blew out OCS. Now they turn their attention to another ranked opponent as number 10 Holland Hall comes to town. Holland Hall, they made quick work of the Dutch last year, but Metro and their head coach Jared McCoy know that this week's matchup has nothing to do with last year, and they're certainly preparing for a battle.
I mean, Holland Hall is really well coached. They're a really good football team. I mean, that's my first thoughts is knowing we've got our work cut out for us. We don't have Ryan Johnson back this year. We're working by committee. Bryce Allman and Levi and Kay Gibson, Tad Campbell, they've all done a great job, but we're definitely, more pass dependent this year. And but we've got a lot of the same kids and they've got a lot of the same kids. So it's going to come down to execution.
Year in and year out, Kingfisher is one of those top teams in Oklahoma, a team that you just kind of pencil in regardless of the year as a playoff team in Class 3A. And they play teams that get them ready for district play. And their district is brutal once again. They'll play not one, but top two ranked teams in Class 4A. They lost to number 1 Tuttle a couple weeks ago. They bounced back with a win last week against Hennessy, and now they get the number 2 ranked team out of Class 4A in Bethany as they travel to face Sammy Brent in Bethany. And we're joined by Kingfisher head coach Jeff Myers to talk about the matchup.
Well, I mean, you're right. We've already faced Tuttle. I mean, obviously, this is kind of going back a year ago where we had Tuttle and Bethany, and they ended up being state champion, state runner-up. So, and last year it was Bethany beat us with a walk-off field goal in the last 3 seconds at our place. It's always been a tough ball game between us. It's always been tight, whether we've won or they've won. And, we know we have a challenge against them this year. I think they're, depending on whatever polls, I guess if you look at those, depending on what you look at, they're either 1 or 2, or at least for sure in the top 4 in Class 4A. So, we know we have a pretty big challenge ahead of us, playing obviously a class above us, but also playing a quality program like Bethany. Coach Arthur's done a really good job in the short time that he's been head coach, even though I know he's been there for a while as a coordinator. But he does do a good job. And obviously the guy that makes him go is Sam Brandt. And, he's that guy that you keep kind of wanting to know when he's going to, I think he'd already graduated. I think he's like a 9th-year senior. It seems like he's been there for forever. But, he does a great job. He's a great athlete. He's also the guy that, like I said, makes him go. And we know that we have a big challenge ahead.
In one of the bigger surprises in week 2, Wagner went on the road and lost to Pryor 42-41 as the Tigers stunned the Bulldogs. Garrett Mitchell was this week's OKPreps Player of the Week after receiving over 64% of the vote and also won the staff pick. He finished with 350 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns as he torched the Bulldogs all night long. Wagner head coach Dale Condick knows that it's bounce back time for his Bulldogs going into this week's matchup with Fort Gibson.
Well, I think, and first want to give credit to Pryor that played a great game and had a good game plan, but I think first and foremost is we have to get a better effort defensively. It was not an acceptable level of effort from what we've seen in the past from Wagner football, and the result was we gave up maybe as many yards as I've ever given up as a head coach in my career, and 42 points. Our style of football, if we score 41 points, we feel like we ought to win. And then just to, coaching and playing, just to be more aware at a point. And we have to take away what's hurting us defensively. We didn't ever really get a good enough grasp of that and to allow one guy to do what he did to us. It's just not acceptable. And not to take anything away from him. He's a great player and had a great night. But, we definitely didn't help things any by how we played.
My thanks goes out to all the coaches who joined us here on the OKPreps Kickoff show. Now it's time to give you 5 players to watch heading into week 3. And this is one of my favorite features to put together because not only do these athletes have what it takes to make plays on Friday night, but we get to show you as well. And in a lot of cases, we get to show you some of these highlights that they've already put up this season. And we're going to start in our top 10 matchups. Millwood going to Cassia Hall. Millwood, we mentioned some of the playmakers that they've been missing. One of the guys who has stood up or stepped up here early on in the 2019 season has been Harold Bagby, an athlete for the Falcons who no matter where you put him on the field, he's going to make plays. And we mentioned this matchup with Cassia Hall and the health of the Falcons being one of the biggest keys. Harold Bagby is another big key as he can have an impact in a variety of ways for the Falcons. And one thing that I really like about Millwood, and if you've watched them over the last few years, they know how to identify their playmakers and they don't just play them in one specific spot. They move them around on the field. So don't be surprised if you end up seeing this kid in a variety of ways, not only offensively, but defensively as well. Harold Bagby, definitely going to be a player to watch, not only this week against Cassia Hall, but if Millwood has a big season once again, Bagby will more than likely be a big reason why. We stay in the small school football, but we go to a Division I commit, Jacob Barrett, a standout for Shakota. He's committed to Eastern Michigan, and he's one of the more dynamic, versatile athletes playing small school football in Oklahoma, and he has Shakota ranked for the first time in a long time. We mentioned Shakota last week on our segment, Teams on the Rise. They had a big game against Hilldale. Jacob Barrett had a big game as well. He not only performed well, but his team got the win, and now they're ranked number 7 in our Class 3A rankings as Jacob Barrett and Shakota. They have a tough test as they go on the road to take on a Eufaula team that a few weeks ago was ranked in the top 10 in Class 2A. They dropped out after losing a close one to Vian being one of the top teams in Class 2A as well. Jacob Barrett, a dynamic player. And look, we mentioned that about Harold, and we're kind of sticking with a theme here as he has the ability to beat a team in a variety of ways. Shakota's lining him up at quarterback. And look, he's not known for his arm, but he can sling the ball around. He's definitely a runner, and he can have an impact, like I mentioned, in a variety of ways. A big-time player to watch, Jacob Barrett and Shakota in a huge matchup against Eufaula. Another big game that didn't make it on our top 10 games list, but definitely has merit to be considered one of the top 10 matchups this week, is Choctaw against Putnam City North. And that leads us to another Division I commit as a player to watch. This time it's Jeff Robertson, linebacker for Choctaw. He is committed to Oklahoma State. He's a player to watch because this kid is an animal. Choctaw, a team that if you're not paying attention to them now in 6A2, they're going to jump up and surprise some people. And this is a measuring stick game for Choctaw. This is to find out just how good we are. I like what they have offensively. I like what they have defensively. And I love the performance of Robertson at that linebacker spot. He's one of the top players in the state for a reason. But like I mentioned, this is a good opportunity for a Choctaw team that wants to be considered one of the best on the west side in Oklahoma. Perfect opportunity to get a win against a Putnam City North team that's one of the best in 6A1. They have plenty of athletes as well. And if Robertson in this Choctaw defense can slow down a PC North offense that has Division I talent on it, well, you definitely need to watch out for the Yellow Jackets this season. Another top 10 matchup we featured already, Metro Christian taking on Holland Hall. And we mentioned one of the biggest keys is Holland Hall defensively. They have to contain. Especially the running game. You're going to give up some big passes. You're going to give up some big plays. I get it. But if you can contain Asher Link to the pocket, then you're going to have success. And the man that's going to be in charge of doing that is junior Owen Ostrowski, a defensive lineman on the rise in Oklahoma. He has the ability to move around. And just because we call him a defensive lineman, he, like a lot of these players on this list, have the versatility to move around, play a variety of positions. He'll have an impact on offense. He'll have an impact on the defensive side of the ball. But if he and this Holland Hall defense can contain Metro and that running attack, that's what really hurt Holland Hall in their matchup with Metro last season, was Metro's rushing attack against the Dutch. If they can contain and bottle up Asher Link and the running attack from Metro, then they have a shot to pull off the upset. And our final player to watch, we go back to our number one game of the week. It's Edison running back Savion Morrison, another Division I commit. He's committed to Nebraska, and he broke Edison great Spencer Tillman. You might recognize that name, football fans. Hall of Famer Spencer Tillman. His school, all-time school rushing record, Savion Morrison was able to break the career record for most yards in Edison school history last week. He has his entire senior season ahead of him to go ahead and pad those stats and pad that record and make it one that may not be reached in the future of Edison football. But this is obviously a huge matchup for Edison and the Eagles going up against Claremore. And if you go back to last week, Claremore let one slip away against Sapulpa, and what hurt them the most? The Sapulpa running game, whether it was the Chieftain running back or Chieftain quarterback Eli Williams, who finished with nearly 250 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Claremore definitely had problems slowing down the run. That's not what you want when you're going up against arguably the best running back in the state in Savion Morrison. Now, Claremore did a good job bottling up Savion last year, but that was last year. There's definitely concerns and there's definitely opportunities to take advantage. If you're Edison, especially, you have to be feeling confident after seeing Sapulpa run up and down the field last week. Savion Morrison, our final player to watch heading into week 3. If he's able to run wild similar to what Sapulpa was able to do last week, it could end up being a long night for the Claremore Zebras. Each and every single week, we give you teams on the rise, teams that are not in the top 10 in their respective classes, but they could end up being. We mentioned Shakota just a few minutes ago being one of those teams that we've mentioned in the past as a team on the rise. They're ranked number 7 now in our Class 3A rankings. There are plenty of teams out there that are right on the outside looking in, and they're knocking on the door. Well, it's time to stop knocking and kick that door in. Here are 3 teams on the rise heading into week 3. We go to Class 5A first, and we go to Duncan. Now, depending on which poll you look at, and there's a lot of media outlets out there, there's a lot of rankings out there, a lot of people already have Duncan ranked in the top 10. They are not in the OKPreps 5A rankings. However, they're right there, and they've shown why. 2-0 on the season so far. They had a close win over Elgin, and we're really going to figure out just how talented this Duncan team is. Is everybody else that already has Duncan right about this team, having them ranked? We're going to figure it out over the next 2 weeks. They host Ada this week before taking on Lawton MacArthur next week. Let's find out just how good this Duncan team is. If you finish 2-0 in that stretch and you go into week 5 at 4-0, well, we'll have no argument there, and you'll certainly be a top 10 team at that point. Big time opportunity over the next 2 weeks for the Duncan Demons. In Class 3A, a team that's typically year in and year out, they find themselves in the rankings. Stigler, another situation where we're going to find out just how good this team. They've had a couple blowout wins. They're 2-0 on the season. They blew out Salisaw last week. They get Muldrow this week. They'll probably win that game as well, and they'll head into week 4 3-0. Then it's measuring stick time because you face the number 2 ranked Lincoln Christian Bulldogs in the district opener. Now, regardless of what happens there, I just want to see how this Stigler team performs against a Lincoln team that's one of the best, not only in Class 3A, but in the state of Oklahoma right now. Offensively, defensively, they have that thing rolling. Now, Stigler, to be considered one of the best in 3A, you got to play them close. You don't necessarily have to win the game. Of course, if you're a Stigler fan, you want to win the football game. But at the same time, if you play Lincoln close, that definitely will check a few boxes for us. Stigler, certainly a team on the rise. And our final team, you go down to Class 2A, and let's shout out Luther as a team. And there's a lot of teams. We mentioned how deep Class 2A is. You can make a case for a lot of different teams that are on the outside looking in. And honestly, we might expand the 2A rankings alone to a top 15 or to a top 20 because there's that many teams that deserve to be ranked that maybe not necessarily are. But how about Luther? After last season going 1-9, after in 2017, they go 9-2. They had a lot of momentum going into 2018, only to go 1-9 on the season. They're already 2-0. They beat Chandler last week. They take on Prague on the road this week. Luther, one of those teams, they got a pretty good quarterback as well. Peyton, I'm blanking on his last name, but Peyton, their QB, has been an impact player for them. He missed some time last year, part of the reason why they went 1-9. Luther, definitely a team on the rise that if some things fall the right way, and their district not as tough as some of the other districts out there, Luther has a chance to be a surprise team in Class 2A. All right, it's that time of the show, and we do it every single week, not only on the Kickoff show, but on the OKPreps Roundup as well every weekend, where we answer your questions. You can send them to us on Twitter, you can send them to us on Facebook, and we answer them right here. And now we start with our first question, and it's a simple one. Is it time to hit the panic button in Jinx? No, not yet. The Trojans, obviously, not the start that they would like. 1-2 on the season. They did get that nice shutout victory down in Texas in week 0. They, however, bounced back with a blowout loss to Bixby. Then they let Union run away from them in the second half last week. After leading the Backyard Bowl early on against the Redskins, they let that one get away from them. They lose 35-20. It's not panic button time for Jinx. This is a young team. They've already had to battle through some injuries, including their starting quarterback, Stephen Kittleman. So let's find out. Let's find out how this team responds in the bye week. They don't have to play this week. Obviously, a huge game looms next week in the district opener against Broken Arrow. But as far as a panic button, it's week 3. And now I understand that Jinx isn't your typical football program where you just can kind of take the wait and see approach. No, they expect to win every single football game. That's what makes them Jinx. But at the same time, let's wait and see. This team still has a lot of talent on it. Maybe not necessarily the talent that we've seen from state championship teams in the past. However, I still trust them to figure things out and be right there when it's all said and done. Speaking of panic button, this is the last week of non-district play, and next week on the Kickoff show, we're going to have a special feature called Panic Button or reset button, where we're going to identify some teams around the state of Oklahoma that maybe have struggled over the first month of the regular season, and we're going to ask the question, is it time to hit the panic button or is it time to hit the reset button? The reset button, obviously more favorable than the panic button. The reset button, obviously meaning you have an opportunity to turn things around going into district play. Panic button, maybe it might be too late, and there's definitely some more concerns there. So be sure to tune in next week as we feature the panic or reset button going into district play. Our next question, I like this one. Is there an early favorite for OKPreps Player of the Year? It's early, so we definitely want to highlight the early in this question. I think that we've seen some great performances so far. Garrett Mitchell, the prior wide receiver, had a great game against Wagner. It's still, very early to put, multiple great games together, but one kid who has done so is Bixby standout Brennan Presley, the senior who's committed to Oklahoma State. He's only played 2 games so far. Bixby had last week off. They take on Putnam City. This week, the Spartans have looked great so far offensively, defensively, and he's looked special. I mean, I think he has 8 touchdown receptions on the young season. Don't know how many receiving yards he has off the top of my head, but I know it's a lot. I think at least 300. And then he has a few interceptions on the defensive side of the ball as well. He's a dynamic player, and I've talked about him for several years now being just that for the Spartans, offensively, defensively, and in special teams. So if I had to identify just one player, I would identify Brennan Presley from Bixby as being one of those guys who has stood out for sure over the course of the first couple of weeks. But there's a lot of football left to be played. Now our final question, and we also had a follow-up comment on this question that they said they didn't think that I would answer it, but I'll go ahead and throw an answer out anyway. And this is just mean. How many touchdowns does Cashin beat Crescent by? That was the question. Obviously from a Cashin fan. Big rivalry game. We love the Cashin Crescent rivalry game. Those two teams do not like each other. Those two communities do not like each other. They talk plenty of trash on social media, and I'm a fan of it. Anytime we talk trash, I'm a fan of it. Just be respectful. They were respectful as well, although this question, not so respectful. How many touchdowns is Cashin going to beat Crescent by? I think that Cashin obviously is the favorite. They're number 1 in Class A. Crescent, they're bouncing back. They had a tough season last year. They're bouncing back, though. I think that they're going to be a lot better than people expect in Class A. How many touchdowns? I don't know. I mean, I don't want to put any disrespect on Crescent's name, but I think Cashin wins this one handily. They show why they're the number 1 ranked team. You kind of want to do that in a rivalry game, so maybe, 4 or 5, maybe take the over as far as how many touchdowns they beat Crescent by, but it should be a fun one. It's a healthy rivalry. These teams don't like each other, and that's okay. You don't have to like everybody. And Cashin definitely going to be flexing their muscles here in this rivalry clash with Crescent. All right, speaking of some picks, we like Cashin in that one. Let's make some picks on our top 10 games, show you the top 10 games once again in the state of Oklahoma this week. And we're going to kick things off. And I should say, I'll pat myself on the back a little bit, and I don't normally do this. 8-2 last week, so take that for whatever it's worth. It's not worth very much, but 8-2 on picks last week. One of those losses was Bishop Kelly and Bishop McGinnis. I took the wrong Bishop. I apologize. But Bishop Kelly, all that means is they're probably going to win the rematch if those two teams end up playing each other in November. But let's make some picks, and we start things off with our number 1 game of the week, Edison taking on Claremore. I like Edison here. I think that this team is hungry. I think that they're going to be able to exploit what Sapulpa was able to exploit last week in the running game. If Claremore doesn't shore that up, fix the mistakes that they had defensively in the running game against Sapulpa, it's going to be a long night for them as they try to contain Savion Morrison. I like the Eagles there. Mustang taking on Westmore. I like the Broncos to continue this nice run. A good start to the season. Let's keep things going. I like Mustang to go on the road to take on Westmore. Westmore has one of the best quarterbacks that Mustang is going to see this year in Dayton Wolf. He's going to be able to put up points. Westmore's going to score. Mustang is going to score. If you like offensive football, and I do, you'll enjoy this one, as I think that both teams going to be able to score points, but I like Mustang getting the win there. Sperry taking on Kingston. I like the Pirates in this matchup. I don't think it's going to be as close as last year, although I wouldn't be surprised if it's close in the first half, if it's still close in the third quarter, but I think that Sperry ends up running away with that one. Lawton MacArthur taking on Clinton at home on a Thursday night. I like the Highlanders to bounce back after a rivalry loss to Lawton. I think that they take care of business. They show just how dangerous offensively that they can be, especially in that passing game. I like the Highlanders there. Another Thursday matchup has Norman hosting Moore, and you'll be able to check out those highlights on OKPreps.com on Friday morning. I like the home team. I like the Tigers. I think that they have too much talent offensively, defensively. They could have their best team since the early 90s. And this is a good, we mentioned the term measuring stick game. This is a good measuring stick game for Norman to see just how good they are against a team in Moore that maybe isn't necessarily one of the best in the state, but they have plenty of talent to make things happen. Metro Christian hosting Holland Hall, number 1 versus number 10. We're going with the top-ranked Patriots there. We mentioned all show long how Holland Hall has to contain Metro, especially that running game. We don't think it happens. We think that Metro offensively is going to be too much. Defensively, they're going to be able to slow down Holland Hall. I think that both teams score points. Metro, though, in the end, scores way more on Friday night. Beggs hosting Shiloh Christian. If you've watched this program over the first couple of weeks, you know one thing. I pull for and I pick the Oklahoma schools regardless of what happens. I don't know how talented Shiloh Christian is. I know that they beat Beggs last year. I don't care. I'm taking Beggs here to rep Oklahoma and get a dub against one of the better teams from Arkansas. You have Bethany taking on number 2, Bethany taking on number 9, Kingfisher. Kingfisher, their brutal non-district schedule continues against one of the best in Class 4A. I like Bethany here. I think that it's going to be a lot closer than Kingfisher's test against Tuttle. I think that Kingfisher plays Bethany closer this week. Maybe doesn't necessarily come down to a last-second field goal like last year, but I like Bethany in this matchup to get the win. Cassia Hall taking on Millwood. I like the Commandos. I think that they're going to bounce back after a loss to Holland Hall a couple of weeks ago. They had last week to regroup, refocus, and focus in on a Millwood team that's really had their number over the last 2 seasons. I like Cassia Hall to get a little revenge with a win over a visiting Millwood team. And then finally, Wagner hosting Fort Gibson. Both teams desperate for a win. I like Wagner to continue their dominance over Fort Gibson. And who knows, we might end up seeing another rematch like we did last year. Both of these teams ended up playing in the first round of the playoffs, with Wagner sweeping the series with Fort Gibson last season 2-0. Let's see what happens when they meet up once again on Friday night, but we like the Bulldogs in that matchup. Before we get out of here, we want to remind you once again, there will be plenty of highlights to check out on OKPreps.com. Going into the weekend on Thursday, we'll be out at Norman as they take on the Moore Lions. Also, on Friday night, we'll be at our game of the week up in Claremore as the Edison Eagles travel up to Claremore to take on the Zebras. We'll have highlights from those matchups. And I've had a couple of questions so far. So you see the helmets. You see the helmets on our desk. A whole lot of east side up here. A whole lot of east side of Oklahoma. Shout out Heritage Hall, 405, what's up? But we have a whole lot of east side, and that's because that's where our studio and our offices are located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So if you're a west side school and you want your helmet to be up on the OKPreps desk, OKPreps studio, send them to us. That's the best way. That's the best way. If you want to reach out to us on social media. That's the best way to reach out to us. Just tweet at us at OKPrepsTV. Let us know that you have a helmet you want to send our way, and we'll get you that information as well. Also, one final time, please, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the OKPreps YouTube channel, as we have plenty of kickoff shows and highlights throughout the 2019 season. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our podcast network on iTunes. Just search OKPreps Podcast. Hit subscribe. Leave a review as well. We definitely appreciate that. And you'll get all of our great podcast content, not only the kickoff shows, but also the OKPreps Roundup, which comes out every single weekend. You can stay tuned for Sunday, as the next edition of the OKPreps Roundup will be released on Sunday, as well as our new top 10 rankings, our new Player of the Week candidates that you'll be able to vote for. Congratulations once again to prior wide receiver Garrett Mitchell, who was not only the staff pick for Player of the Week, but he won the fan vote as well with 64% of the vote. Congratulations to him after a fantastic performance against the Wagner Bulldogs. One final time, my thanks to the coaches who joined us. We thank you for tuning in, not only this week, but every single week. We'll be right back here next Thursday with another edition of the OKPreps Kickoff Show. I'm your host, Michael Knight, and once again, it's week 3. Final week of non-district play. Starting next week, those games start counting for real. We'll see you next week. This has been another edition of the OKPreps Kickoff Show.